good morning.
Are you ready?
Yes, yes.
So
Good
we
morning.
have a special invitee and who has done a lot of work on this COVID and how to prevent that and how it happens and what are the various protections which you have to follow and how to ensure that you start learning, you start living with Corona, with the virus, it is going to be here. To stay. We cannot push it out, and so we need to live together like any other woman or any negative like pollution or environmental issues or vehicles or industries or even the burglars and thieves and murderers. We need to start learning to live with the corona. I'm really glad, Jagdish, to spare your time and join this meeting and answer the questions of all these people. So a typical schedule, what I think Jagdish has mentioned to me is that around 15-20 minutes he will talk about the COVID-19 and later open for discussion. So one by one, I think you need to ask questions, or if you can just send it by chat. Your questions, if you can send it by chat, he will go through each of the question and then answer the respective questions. I think he has been magnanimous enough to tell me that his time limit is not there, even though we have a time limit put at 12 o'clock. But if you have questions which needs to be answered, I think he said he is ready to answer all the questions. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Jagdish, and we are looking forward to your input. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this, for the opportunity. I think, as a doctor, what I'm trying to do is bring out the accurate awareness. I'm sure all of you have had a lot of information floating through your WhatsApp inboxes or something that you see on social media. Many times they are not having the right source or credibility, and you may end up believing them. While most of them are harmless, some of them can be dangerous. So I think the point over here is that while I take this session at any point of time, if you have any questions, or even if it is validating that, I got this information on my WhatsApp, is that true? Does that really happen? Any of those kind of questions, please continuously start sharing it on the chat message. This is your session. Basically, this is an awareness session. So this has to be as much in line with what you want. I already know about COVID-19, so I will only be of benefit if I am able to answer your questions. So don't wait for the 15-20 minutes. Even in the beginning, if you have the questions, I can start answering and we can have an interactive, discussion about it. And I will regularly keep checking the chat window. So right now I don't see any questions, but I'll keep checking that. So brief introduction about myself. I am Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi. I am an ENT surgeon and I work at Fortis Hospital, Bannerghatta Road. And one of the things that I am a specialist is in the nose and sinus region. So when it comes to COVID-19, this is very direct to my field of area. And to give you a bit of background about COVID-19. So COVID-19 is the name of the disease. It is basically coronavirus disease 2019 because this was identified. The earliest case for this was found to be on 27 November in China. So because it is a virus that was found in the year 2019, they call it COVID-19. But COVID-19 is not the name of the virus. The name of the virus is SARS-CoV-2, which is basically SARS stands for severe acute respiratory, and CoV is coronavirus, and 2 because this is a second strain. And we have had SARS virus in the past. I'm sure you've heard of SARS before. Then we had MERS, which is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. Then we had H1N1 in India, bird flu, swine flu, all of these things you have heard of. These respiratory viruses are also influenza viruses. Basically, every 3 to 4 years, they mutate and they re-attack the world. And this is a very common norm, right, since the Spanish flu in 1918. and sometimes they are of less milder this thing. Sometimes they are much more severe. Like for example, I don't know whether 10 years ago you remember the H1N1 or the swine flu epidemic. Swine flu or H1N1 is much more dangerous than COVID-19 in terms of the damage it creates, but it is less infective. It does not spread as fast as COVID-19. So that's why maybe we did not see a time of lockdown, even though I remember I was in the hospital at that point of time. And in the same day, about 10 to 12 patients, for sudden reasons, lung conditions died in the ward in a matter of hours. And I did not go home for 2 days because we did not know whether this is something that will spread very fast or not. And the many thousands of lives were lost, but there was never a national lockdown or this kind of a reaction to it. And probably because now it is a global issue, there's a lot of eyeballs on whether every country is taking the right step or not. The tracking is very, very meticulous, and the social media reach, obviously, since the last 10 years has grown multifold. The amount of information that one can get from any part of the world, the capability is very high. So we are used to having these kind of viruses that keep attacking, every 4-5 years, 3 years, milder ones, and then these H1N1 type bigger ones every 10 years. But the reason why COVID-19 is a little different and a little bit of an extra problem is because this is the first time this virus has attacked human beings. All other viruses in some form or the other has attacked human beings in the past, which means either we know some medication that works for it, either there is a vaccine for it. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, they can ask, no problem. Right. But it is a novel virus. It is the first time it is attacked in humans. We do not know how it is originated. But the genomic sequence says that it is come from bats or pangolins, which is another type of, creature like bat. And that is the genomic sequence. It has either self-mutated. A lot of people speculate if it was engineered. But in whichever case, the reason why this virus is posing such a big problem is because it can spread very fast, but in different people, for different reasons, it can have different level of damage. Some people, it may be completely asymptomatic. You may not even know that you have it. And in some people, within a matter of hours to days, you can go into severe, lung problems and require ventilator. And then afterwards, it is downhill. Many do not survive. And the other thing that makes this virus very different from most of the others is traditionally when a virus attacks a human body, you develop antibodies against that virus, and then you get protection from that virus when it reattacks. This COVID-19, whatever recent literature we are reading, we are seeing that it is able to mutate very fast. It is able to change its structure very quickly. Some reports say that it has already changed itself 30 times. And a little more credible source has confirmed that it has changed itself 11 times. So there are 11 different variations of COVID-19 across the world, which means that if you get infected by one strain and then get reinfected by another strain, then the antibodies in the beginning that you have developed may not entirely work on the virus again. And that is a very scary thing, because that also means that vaccines may not work in the case of COVID-19, because a vaccine can be created for a particular strain, maybe 2 strains or 3 strains. But if the virus keeps mutating, the vaccine may also not work. So that is the concern with this particular virus. And that's why, like Mr. Parameswaran mentioned, that this is probably here to stay for a long time, and maybe it is here to stay with different strains, and different strains may have different abilities, to create, problems. And somebody saying, I'm not able to hear presenter's voice. Is that all right? Can you hear now? Can we confirm if my voice is heard so that I can proceed?
No, we can hear.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so this is the background about, Corona, or, COVID-19. Corona, it was originally called, but that is the name that is stuck. But coronaviruses are just respiratory viruses that have been coming from a long time. But this is SARS-CoV-2, which is the name of the virus that has been given, and it is a novel coronavirus, or they call it. And COVID-19 is the name of the disease. Now, the main symptoms of COVID-19, as you may know, is it usually starts with throat pain and painful swallowing. So, when you throat pain, painful swallowing, and dry cough are usually the first phase symptoms. It basically means that the virus has entered the body and it has started affecting the passage from the nose to the lungs, and normally the back of the mouth or the throat area is one that gets most affected, because all the secretions from the nose, they collect there, and the viral load is very high, and we have tonsils and we have a lot of folds over there where these secretions stay for longer and it makes them infect that area. So having throat pain that starts becoming more and more severe, and especially painful swallowing, you have to wince when you have to swallow, and dry cough are the first alerting symptoms for COVID-19. Stuffy nose, or feeling the nose is blocked, is also another symptom. But runny nose and sneezing is not considered as a symptom of COVID-19. So runny nose or sneezing is a symptom of allergy. And in a place like Bangalore, where allergy is so prevalent, it is a matter of concern, because even though sneezing is not a symptom of COVID-19, but someone with COVID-19, if they sneeze, they can spread it. Now, there is, the diseases do not come like textbooks, no? They do not come saying that, oh, there is already COVID-19, so I am allergic, I will not come. It's not like that. Multiple things stay together. So if somebody is allergic, they will be allergic even with COVID-19, they will be allergic even without COVID-19. And if somebody has throat pain, dry cough, and it has the active virus living in the back of their throats, in their nose secretions, and they also have allergy and they start sneezing, then they can spread it very, very quickly, because a sneeze is a powerful body's attempt to throw away, some foreign particle. And a sneeze can spread as far as 8 to 10 meters in aerosol. It may not stay in the air too long, it falls, but it can go that far away. So that's why, though sneezing and runny nose is not a symptom of COVID-19, but a suspected person with COVID-19 who has sneezing and allergy can spread it to a lot of people. And that's why the practice is that either sneeze with the mask on, or sneeze with a tissue that you can then discard away, or sneeze into your elbow, so that there is no direct contact with your hands. So this is the initial symptoms of corona or COVID-19. And then the other symptoms that when it moves to the next stage is starting to have fever. And this fever is usually initially very mild fever, and then it starts becoming more and more severe fever. And the fever is associated with a lot of body pain and weakness, complete loss of energy, not able to do anything, just lying down on the bed with fever. And now the newer symptoms that have been added is you also have chills. You feel very, very cold and your body shakes. and and the temperature can go as high as 102 to 104 Fahrenheit, and the throat pain and difficulty in swallowing and cough remains, but fever, body pain, muscle pain, joint pain, weakness, tiredness, and chills and rigors are considered as the next phase of COVID-19. And then what happens is the virus takes over your entire immune system and spreads from upper airway to lower airway. So the demarcation is the voice box. Anything above it is upper airway, and as long as you have upper airway problem, it is not dangerous. But the moment the virus crosses to lower airway, the rest of the windpipe and the lungs, then the dry cough starts becoming productive cough with lot of sputum, lot of phlegm, generally colorless. It will not have any color like yellow or green. It will be colorless. And when you lie down, the cough increases, and slowly you feel difficulty in breathing, not able to breathe, not able to say one sentence without taking a breath in between, just saying one or two words and breathing and feeling very tired. That is the most dangerous phase of COVID-19, where one needs to be rushed to the hospital, because at any point of time, the lungs can give up and the person will not be able to breathe on their own. And at that point of time, they may require a ventilator or some sort of machine to help them in breathing, mechanical ventilation. And mechanical ventilators are available in ICUs. So they will take them to the ICU and give them the mechanical ventilation. And that is where the complications start, because to give mechanical ventilation, what happens? You have to sedate the entire body, you have to sedate the lungs, and then put in a pipe into the mouth that goes into the windpipe, and then attach it to a machine. Just that whole process itself can be causing lots of other infections to the lungs, and it makes it very difficult for the people to survive. On an average, people with COVID-19 are kept on the ventilator or ICU for 10 to 14 days before they start recovering. So that is the reason why, reaching to that stage is very dangerous. And a lot of people try to hide their early symptoms, allowing the progression to this stage, which is dangerous to themselves and others. Because nowadays there's a lot of stigma. The moment you are found to be COVID-19 positive, your entire colony will be warded off and blocked like it's a war zone. And there's a lot of stigma by neighbors, a lot of stigma by family members, because it's a very contagious disease. Many people hide it. You have no idea the number of calls I get in a day saying, "Sir, I'm having throat pain, but it is normal type of throat pain. I am having cough, dry cough, but it is that usual normal dry cough. It is not the COVID-19 dry cough." I'm like, "Did you get a test to say it is not a COVID-19 dry cough?" No, I can feel it. It is that I keep getting it for many years. It's that normal kind of cough with little normal kind of throat pain, with little normal kind of fever also. I have little, it's normal only, but it is fever. And little bit normal body pain also I'm having. And little normal, nose blockage. I keep having it. So it is that normal. There's a lot of normalization of these symptoms are happening because people do not want to be stigmatized. And what that does is that people don't seek treatment in that early stage, because fearing that somebody will ask them to get a test. And then if they are positive, then what will happen? As usual, our health is always second priority. What society thinks of us is first priority, especially in India. So that is why it creates a lot of concerns. And that is why some people rapidly spread, go from the upper respiratory to lower respiratory. And then they have to eventually be hospitalized. And it is very difficult. Your family members cannot be there when you are in the ICU. Many people are, they pass away without even meeting their family members for the last time. So you have to weigh the benefits over, outputs, and do not think so much about stigma at this point of time, which I know in India is it's a bigger disease altogether. But do not risk your life for that fear of stigma. So we got a question over here. let me address that. What is the time duration from first stage to second stage? See, in patients who have symptoms, everything happens within the first 14 days. Average time duration for one to shift from some symptoms from the upper respiratory to lower respiratory is considered from 5 to 7 days. So suppose if you start developing throat pain and dry cough, and within the next 5 days you're having breathlessness, then that is a normal speed of progression. But in some people, it spreads much faster. We have seen where somebody just had throat pain and dry cough one day, and just the next day they're on the ventilator. And for some people, we see they have throat pain and dry cough on one day, but 10 days later, they develop breathlessness. And we are beginning to realize that there are so many factors that affect the strength of this virus on the body. And it's important to understand what those factors are. But I think in terms of symptoms, I hope I have given a clear picture of how it progresses from throat pain, dry cough, nose stuffiness to fever with chills and rigors and weakness and body pain and joint pain to cough with sputum, worsening on lying down and breathlessness and need for ventilator. Death is invariably multi-organ failure, because when you're on a ventilator, you're not able to breathe. The dynamics of the lungs puts a lot of load on the heart. The heart is not able to pump enough fluids. There is a backlash to the kidneys, and the kidneys start to fail. And then the entire balance, or hemodynamics as we call it, of the body starts to change. And it becomes very difficult for the person to survive. More so if they have conditions like hypertension or high BP, and diabetes or raised blood sugar. These two things already affect the blood vessels to the kidney and the blood vessels to the heart. And in addition to that, there is this load because the lung is not pumped, because all the blood from the heart goes to the lungs. And when the lungs are not able to make the gas exchange, the fluid starts accumulating, then there is a backflow to the heart. When the heart backflows it to the kidney, and that for the ICU team, that becomes very, very challenging to manage. If it was a short-lived virus, the 1 or 2 day ICU stay, 3 day ICU stay, I think the recovery chances would be very good. But the virus doesn't leave very easily. See, for most viruses, our treatment is, we don't usually have a drug to treat the virus. We do symptomatic treatment. We try to help the body fight it by reducing the symptoms. Throat pain, cough, then we give painkillers. We try to give syrups that reduce the cough. Fever, we try to control the fever. We allow the body to start building the immunity and fight against it. Similarly, ventilator, we are supporting the lung till the virus leaves. And many viruses would leave in 2-3 days. This virus stays for weeks. And to put on ventilator for that long period of time, it is a very difficult. Generally, even before the virus, our protocol is if somebody is on the ventilator for more than 3 days, automatically the recovery chances become very, very poor. And anybody who recovers within the first 2 to 3 days basically go back to normal, just as if nothing happened. And here we are seeing average stay 8 to 10 days on the ventilator. And that is why, there are such high deaths because of, COVID-19. But very interestingly, India has not had the kind of numbers that US had, that Italy or other Spain or the Middle East or European countries have had. And there are a lot of factors that are giving India some protection. And I think I can start talking about those factors. And if you have any questions, please keep sharing them. Now, one of the main reasons why, in particular, Italy had a lot of high number of cases, and now data has started to come. See, it's a new virus, so initially there was zero data, and anything that works, we used to start believing that it works. And now because now it has been there for at least 4 or 5 months. A lot of countries are publishing data based on large number of volumes of patients, and now we are getting a lot more understanding about the COVID-19 disease and the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And what was very strange is that when the disease happened in China, and it was first identified on 27 November, and it peaked in January when it started hitting our newspapers, and we started becoming aware of corona only by the end of January. There have been a total damage of around 4,000 plus deaths and 10,000 cases in China, after which it was contained. But if you look at the progression in Italy, it crossed 10,000 deaths very, very quickly and was more damaging. And that is when people try to think why in one country it was still meeting the 4% mortality, whereas in some places like Italy, it is very, very high mortality. And then some data started to surface about the correlation of COVID-19 severity with having hypertension and diabetes, and using a medicine called ibuprofen or Brufen, as you may have heard it, as it is available in India, is called Brufen. It's a painkiller, and ibuprofen is the drug name. And apparently in European countries, in UK and in Europe, ibuprofen is the first go-to painkiller that people take whenever they have any sort of pain, whether it's headache, whether it's body pain, whether it is muscle pain, any pain. The over-the-counter drug available is ibuprofen. And the strong correlation that was found is ibuprofen usage helps the virus hit the lung receptors which it attacks much faster. And especially those who have high BP, that receptor is more exposed. So it progresses from upper respiratory to lower respiratory in a matter of hours. And the lower respiratory symptoms are extremely severe, requiring immediate ventilation and very poor recovery. And this study started coming when they saw that a lot of the patients who were dying in Italy and European countries had taken ibuprofen when they had the fever and body pain stage. And then ibuprofen was officially stopped and told you should not take this when you have body pain or headache or any other symptoms in the beginning. How is that protective for India? Because in India, any child, any adult, anywhere in the country, 1.3 billion people know that if you have pain, you have to take paracetamol, Calpol, Crocin, Dolo. These names almost everybody knows. And paracetamol is a very different kind of painkiller, unlike ibuprofen. It does not affect or any of the receptors related to the lung. It works in a very different pain-killing mechanism. And because that is our go-to medicine, it does not increase the severity of people with COVID-19, because those with COVID-19, if they have fever also, they take paracetamol. They don't take ibuprofen. If they have body pain, joint pain, they take paracetamol. And paracetamol is considered by far to be one of the safest painkillers and safest fever-reducing medications to take. And it is extremely widely available in India, both in the pharmacies and also in our awareness. We know that any fever, we have to take paracetamol, Imol, Crocin, Dolo, these kind of names, they come. And that first go-to painkiller medication plays a big role in the spread of COVID-19. And that is one of the factors why we don't have that high number of, severity of cases. The other correlation was found is with malaria. And somebody did a study and said malaria endemic countries, that is countries which have malaria throughout the year, these places, COVID-19 severity is very low. And there have been a lot of studies that show the anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine, which I think in the beginning you must have heard a lot about in curing COVID-19, where in some patients it helped them recover, whereas in some patients it worsened it. And because we don't know much about the disease, initially in the news and media it started coming, if you take hydroxychloroquine, your chance of getting COVID-19 becomes less. And then a lot of people started buying the hydroxychloroquine from the pharmacy and started storing it and then started having it without any medical prescription. And then they started having complications because it can cause blindness if it is taken in the incorrect dosage. They started having heart problems, dying of sudden heart attack because it slows down the rhythm of the heart. And because of those reasons, what happened is hydroxychloroquine studies started coming, and now all the clinical trials, all the big studies that have been done on hydroxychloroquine show that hydroxychloroquine is not effective against COVID-19. In fact, it worsens the disease and it causes a lot of complications. So you should not take it. Just 2 days back, the president of Madagascar said there is a herbal remedy which was used for malaria that works on COVID-19, and now they're propagating that. What is the pattern that we are seeing is in very small amount of people, there is recovery. But when you do it on large number of people, the recovery is not significant or substantial. So, so I don't think these anti-malarial medications work, but there has been, demographic correlation that in countries which have malaria for some reason, either because of the malaria disease or because of just a different genetic make, they are not very susceptible. The other reason why Indians are a little more protected is there is a lot of data that's coming out about BCG vaccine, the vaccine that is given for tuberculosis right at birth. There have been studies that show people who have been given the BCG vaccine at birth have certain immunity that works over COVID-19. That has also been scientifically proven. And European American countries do not give BCG vaccine because tuberculosis is not a national problem for them. Tuberculosis is one of the leading causes of death in India. There is a national program that is very aggressively trying to curb the problem. And getting the first dose of the vaccine at birth is one of our immunization protocols. So, and it gives immunity for up to 50 years. And all of those people seem to have, a protective effect. Now, after seeing this news, of course, all the elderly started getting repeat doses and then they started having complications to the vaccine. It doesn't work that way. Only when BCG is taken in childhood and over 10, 20, 30 years, the immunity is developed. That is the immunity that helps. It is just not the immediate dose of the vaccine. You must understand the vaccine is not the antibody that is being injected into you. It is the deactivated organism. So in tuberculosis vaccine, it is the deactivated tuberculosis itself that is being injected into the muscle. And so that your body's immune system identifies those deactivated bacteria and start producing antibodies. It takes a long time to produce antibodies. It takes 14 days to start producing it, but for it to mature and become smart enough to identify and fight takes time. Even the viral vaccine that is being developed of COVID-19, they're not going to be injecting antibodies into you. They're going to be injecting broken pieces of the virus or completely deactivated virus into your body so that you can produce antibodies. So that is the other, factor. Temperature, there has been so much mixed review about whether the temperature has positive effect or not. Because people say that hot environment, the virus should not multiply. But then with that logic, cold environment, it should multiply faster. If you look at India, colder places like Kashmir, Srinagar, Northeast, Nepal, not that many cases. But Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Gujarat, central belt of India, which is very hot, Tamil Nadu, have very, very high number of cases and the highest number of deaths in our country. colder environments that are there in European countries, colder parts of US, they are all, there's no correlation that is being seen. But when some studies are done in artificial settings, they have shown that over 40 degrees, the virus multiplication slows down. It does not stop. So it could be possible that certain types of hot environment or dry environment can reduce the spread or the if it reduces the multiplication also, then it reduces the severity, because then the viral load comes down, allows the body a better chance to recover. That could explain that even though there are high number of cases in the hot belts of India, the death rates are still not very high, even though they're unfortunate deaths. But if you just look at it data point of view and scientifically, it is not extremely high, and that could be because of the low multiplication of the virus. New other studies correlation has come with related to vitamin D. Those who have vitamin D deficiency seeming to get more aggressive COVID-19, but those with good vitamin D levels, they don't have that much problem. And that's why I think labor workers, people who are out in the sun a lot, seem to not be so affected, versus those who are sitting in their houses less exposed to sunlight with low vitamin D seem to be getting these kind of aggressive forms of COVID-19. So these are the factors that I think protects India. Now, some newer data that is coming, which is a little alarming, is now data is beginning to come that the virus was there in other parts of the world even before they identified it. Like, for example, a study from France showed that the virus was there in December itself, even though their first reported case was end of Jan. And yesterday I was reading an article which was claiming that even from October onwards last year, a different version of the virus was there. How much nano silver effect on COVID-19 virus? To my knowledge, I don't know about the use of nano silver effect of COVID-19. I have not come across any literature. I may have to read up and come. It's a very specific question, but I will try to find out if any nanoparticle studies have been done on COVID-19. Somebody is asking how the COVID test knows that COVID-19 is negative or positive. Okay. Let me explain about how the COVID-19 testing is done. There are three types of tests. There is something called as RT-PCR, reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. You don't have to remember the word, but what it does is it is finding the RNA. Like we have DNA. Heard of DNA, right? Double helix. Viruses have RNA, single helix. They don't have double helix. And RNA is the thing that replicates and multiplies. So what they do is when you take a throat swab, you pass a particular cotton swab or a swab all the way to the back of the nose into the nasopharynx and send it for testing. They artificially help the multiplication of the RNA, and then they see that RNA in the microscope after staining it. And if the RNA is seen, it is very accurate that the virus is in the body, because you're seeing the viral RNA. You are seeing that core multiplying component of the virus. And this test takes up to 48 hours. And this is the RT-PCR test, which is the first test that everyone has been using. Now, the other test which ICMR and the government is trying to push is a rapid immunoglobulin test. Now, this rapid immunoglobulin test, what it does is it tests the antibody, which is a protein. And that's why this is rapid. It is like a pregnancy stick test where you can put one drop of urine and it shows whether there is a white, one red line or two red lines, or it's very as simple as that. They create the antigen part on the stick. They take your blood sample and they put the blood onto that stick, and then they see whether there is 2 red lines or 1 red line. As simple as that. And but the problem with these, this can be a good test for screening, but we are seeing a lot of variability, and lot of variability in the sense some people who are testing RNA positive are showing negative immunoglobulin. Some people are showing positive immunoglobulin, are showing RNA negative. In the immunoglobulin also, there is IgM, which is a bigger immunoglobulin that is seen immediately, which means active stage of disease. But IgG immunoglobulin, which is a much more refined molecule, this means that either the person is cured or the person has antibodies in an active stage. So because of these reasons, what is recommended is the RNA test and the IgG test should be done both in same patient. But right now we are not doing it like that. We are doing only the RNA PCR particular test. Since how long asymptomatic positive COVID patients don't know his or her symptoms? What is the maximum time frame for such duration? Now, an asymptomatic patient, by definition, he or she is a carrier, and a carrier can be for an indefinite period of time. It is just the virus being very clever and smart. So what a virus does, see, a virus is also an organism that wants to survive, it wants to eat, it wants to multiply, it wants to grow. And sometimes when it enters some people's bodies, it knows that their immune system is strong. So there is no point trying to fight. It will kill us. So what they do is they can convert into an inactive stage. It's called ghost stage. They are there in the body, but they are inactive. They are not multiplying rapidly. They are not causing any disease. They are waiting for the immunity to come down. And they could wait for 1 year, they could wait for 5 years, they could wait for 10 years. We don't know. It depends upon the virus. Whenever your immunity falls, sometime you develop some bacterial infection, sometime you develop some other viral infection. Your immunity is fighting against that, then the virus will see, yeah, this is my time. Their antibodies are very, very distracted. Now I will spread. And suddenly you will find people to have positivity in these things. We are seeing H1N1 cases even today, 10 years after H1N1 epidemic was in India. We see cases like these. HIV cases are turning positive 10, 15 years later on. The viruses have this ability to go into carrier stage. The only thing is we thought that number will be small. What is happening with COVID-19 is we are identifying majority of people are asymptomatic. Now, asymptomatic doesn't mean that it is actively multiplying, but they are not showing symptoms. Obviously, if it multiplies very fast, you will show symptoms. It will affect. It is just choosing to be a carrier state. So we cannot tell how long it will remain in the body. And that is why this is not a virus that is easily going to be eliminated. And it has factors that, it is going to stay for a long time because of these kind of mutation ability that it has, carrier ability that it has. And the worst part is that people who are asymptomatic, they can still spread the disease. And they may spread it to somebody who does not have such a good immune makeup. And for them, the virus may spread and cause a lot of damage. And that is how the virus chooses to survive. So we can't really say how long. Maximum time frame of such situation, we really cannot say. It could be the entire lifetime of the person also. Viruses are very, very hard to understand. That's why it is very hard for a bacteria to wipe out the human race. But it is very likely that a virus can wipe out the human race. And there have been very, very large viral epidemics. You've heard of the plague. So these are things that can really wipe out a lot of people. Polio is also a virus that has disabled millions of people. And viruses know how to stay, and they know how to survive. So that is the thing. And that's why I think anybody with any symptoms just need to be treated, assuming that you are COVID-19 positive, and you have to quarantine yourself. You have to basically just stay isolated for 14 days to allow that period to go away. If you are asymptomatic or if you are normal, you are still expected to follow protocols of social distancing at least for the next 6 months, so that you do not infect your parents, grandparents, children, or your loved ones. Even though you may be completely normal and not have any symptoms, you cannot safely conclude that you are free from the disease unless you do an RT-PCR test and it shows that it is negative. Then that probably proves that you don't have any viral RNA in your secretions of your nose or airway. But without that, nobody can really tell if somebody is having COVID-19 or not. Just by symptoms, you can definitely not say that. So the basic social distancing protocols are not very difficult. See, many countries do not always adopt such a aggressive lockdown. The reason why in India such a step was taken because the Indian public, even though many follow, but there's still a very large number of people who just do not follow protocols because they feel that, if they are fine, they don't have it. And that is the most scariest part, more than the virus, is that the mindset that we typically have is always to normalize things, is always to, not panic much, which is good in many times, but for a virus like this that can spread, it is not a very safe thing because it may not affect you, but we don't think about the effect it can have on people around us. Otherwise, if people maintain a 6 feet distance, wear a mask in public areas, wash their hands frequently, and cough and sneeze on their elbow, just doing these 4 things, you can resume all your activities, all economic activities, shops, everything can be resumed. But the problem is whether it will be implemented sincerely by everyone. And that is a big question, because even during the lockdown, you see thousands of people going for market and shopping and all other things. And even for simple things like lighting a candle, they take out processions. For clapping in the balcony, they're going out and, taking out processions and dancing. So violation of protocols is a very, very big concern with a densely populated, diverse-minded population like ours. And that's why such a measure had to be taken. But it is not realistic to do this for a long period of time. And I think that's why after 45 days of lockdown, I really doubt anybody will extend it. Telangana is extended till the end of the month. Maharashtra may extend it because there are high volume of cases. Karnataka is already resuming things back to normal. There's traffic jams outside. But I think the social distancing has to be maintained. And I repeat, 6 feet distance from 2 human beings. Wear a mask whenever you're going into a public place where there are many people. Wash your hands frequently. Do not touch your face and cough and sneeze in your elbow. And you can resume all your activities that you can do. There's a question coming on how to build immunity. Immunity building takes time, but you can start with these things. So some of the food items that are known to build immunity is garlic, ginger, almonds, dark chocolate, sweet potatoes, and green leafy vegetables. And these supplements are known to increase immunity. Anything with vitamin C, especially citrus fruit like oranges, lemons, even green chilies, are known to improve recovery, healing, because vitamin C is used for healing of tissues. And it is also a part of the immune process to heal and recover. So these items, and most widely, I think garlic and ginger, and these very strongly improve the immunity. So garlic, ginger, almonds, dark chocolate, sweet potatoes, and vitamin C rich citrus fruits, green leafy vegetables, dals. You need proteins. If your body to recover and your immunoglobulins, you need proteins. So dal and all of these, spinach particularly, I think spinach is a very strong immune building component to take. these things will build your immunity. But it is not like, you take it today and, it will start working right away. I think the immune function takes a good 3 to 6 months to grow with these kind of things. But it's good practice to keep taking it to help your body stay with good immunity. The other factor of good immunity uh, is to prevent having other conditions or control other conditions well, especially thyroid diseases, diabetes, and blood pressure needs to be really well controlled to keep your immune system in good check in addition to these things. I'm seeing another question is if any possibility of positive recovered COVID patient can get infected multiple times. Yes, in fact, that we are seeing only in COVID-19. I was mentioning that this is not something that we see in other viruses because for one mutation, which is a change in the structure of the virus, typically takes 1 to 2 years. With COVID-19, we are seeing that it has changed its structure 11 times in a matter of 4 months. And now they are saying that a different strain of this virus was there even last year from October 2019. And that is why people in Wuhan, China, who recovered from COVID-19 got reinfected with another strain of COVID-19. And with COVID-19, it definitely looks like if you get a different strain, because it's mutating very fast, it is a strong possibility to get reinfected for the second time or the third time. And for that same very reason, having a successful vaccine is going to be very doubtful. Italy claims to have cracked the code. Let us see how well it does in its trials and studies. The Pune Serum Institute is claiming in September they will have a vaccine out. Now, whether this vaccine will be effective on all strains or not is going to be the biggest deciding factor of whether we can eliminate the spread of this virus entirely or not. But to answer your question, yes, with COVID-19, it is very much possible to get reinfected. How will one know that they are carrier of virus? If you do this RT-PCR test or the RNA test, it will tell you whether you have the virus inside you and you're a carrier or not. Because you will have no symptoms, but you will test positive for the RNA in your secretions. Unfortunately, because there are limited number of tests, we do not have the resources to test 1.3 billion people. The protocol for testing will be travel history, contact, or you are in one of the containment zones or hot zones, hotspot zones where you've been in close contact with people with potential COVID-19 positive and you have very specific symptoms, then only the authorities will even test you. If you go today to any of these labs and say, I want to test if I have COVID-19, people are going to refuse the test to you. So because of that, it is not possible to know whether you are a carrier or not. And that is just the reflection of our healthcare system. In China, the reason why they could do so many studies is because each positive patient underwent the test at least 30 to 40 times throughout. They had that many kits, probably because China is also very strong in manufacturing. But now our kits are being from importing 50,000 kits, we are manufacturing 2 lakh kits a day. Is a very promising sign. But again, when we have a population of 1.3 billion, even 2 lakhs a day falls short. But if there was a way to test every human being, which I think they tried to do in West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee went on this campaign of going door to door testing. They tested quite a few people and they found some positive cases, but they wasted a lot of kits on people who just did not test positive. But at least they came to know whether they were negative or whether they were carriers. But to do that on a national approach, I think our government chooses the lockdown approach and quarantine anyone with potential symptoms and test only those who really are indicated for it. So that's why it's not possible to know. COVID-19 is naturally developed virus or developed in lab for biological warfare. There's a lot of speculation that it was developed biologically because of this being called the perfect virus. It has the right components. It spreads really fast. It attacks a subset of people. It mutates really quickly, and it's really difficult to beat. and this is what makes it likely that it was a biological warfare. But having said that, a lot of scientists who have tried to validate this have come up with very, very strong evidence that it is not a biological warfare, product. It is a result of natural evolution of the virus, and the virus from previous strains has now learned, and because there is a very high population in the world, it has got enough, it has infected enough people to learn how to quickly mutate. And when they studied the genomic structure and its evolution, they see that the genomic evolution and mutation comes under natural things. There has not been such a huge unrealistic jump that how did this genome structure come from the source. If something like that would have come, then they would have definitely thought that it was engineered. But I think the genomic mutation dating back of the original strains of the virus show that it has been a natural progression, and SARS-CoV-2 itself came out of natural. However, it may have come out of unnatural activities, could be because of eating bats or cooking these bats, or it's obviously a zoonotic virus. It has come from animal sources. So there have been unnatural practices, but the process of mutation has been natural, is what scientists prove with a lot of confidence. I've read some of these articles and the data is very convincing and very scientific. So on that basis, I don't think it is a biological warfare, especially that it is a virus that has now affected almost all countries to some extent. Is there any chance of relapse of COVID-19 for a patient who was already recovered? If the patient is already recovered from the same strain of the virus, there is no chance of relapse because your immune function would have easily taken it. But if you get reinfected by a new strain, yeah, you can get reinfected by a new strain. But if you have defeated an existing strain in your body, you will not have a relapse. It will, you will have recovery from that strain forever. And that is how the immune system works. Unless you have a condition like AIDS or HIV, where your immune system is a disease, you're itself defective, then there can be a relapse if the person fails to take their HIV medications. Having said that, an anti-HIV drug called remdesivir has shown a lot of positive results in clinical trials. So that is a drug that can work. If vaccine is developed, one second, how to know? See, the answer to how to know will always be getting an RNA PCR test. That is the only way to know whether the virus is there in your body or not. So you have to just do that test to come to know it. Okay, if vaccine is developed and implemented with COVID-19, can be eliminated and life can go back to normal. Yeah. I mean, if a successful vaccine is developed that works on all the strains and the vaccine itself does not cause any harm, because the reason why it takes long to make a vaccine is to test its safety. And a lot of vaccines, what it does is it has side effects. Like, for example, if you are vaccinated and you develop another disease, then that other disease can be very severe. So just like you are seeing correlation between tuberculosis vaccine, malaria in COVID-19, would that mean that if you give the vaccine, would malaria be more severe? Would tuberculosis be more severe? These are things which are very hard to study from the safety standpoint, and that's why it takes 1 to 2 years to make a vaccine safe and bring it out into the market. But yeah, if we get a perfect vaccine, obviously the whole thing can be eliminated and everything can go back to normal. What is herd immunity? Herd immunity is basically a concept of how every viral spread becomes, it automatically comes down, is when a community, like for example, let me say, if a virus infects me and my immune system is strong and I try to fight the virus, and in the replication in my body, the virus mutation makes it a weaker virus. And when I spread it to another person, their immune system makes it even more weaker. And when I spread it to another person, their immune system makes it mutate to even more weaker. After that, it becomes a very trivial throat pain or just a very mild throat pain or just some amount of mild cold. And you had this so many times, right, with our common cold and flu. Fall ill for 2-3 days and it becomes all right. You need to have enough population to bring that virus down to that level. You need to have an enough population with that kind of immunity to bring the virus to mutate and reduce its viral strain or its virulence. And typically we see when a community population of 10 to 20,000 positive cases in any particular region is known to get successful herd immunity. And you can see in the most of the countries where the cases are beginning to dip and decline, they are usually after that number of cases in a community, not the country. Country is a very big place. It has to be in a particular community, and then the virus, and then the whole immunity, the whole population starts developing a herd immunity, which means the antibodies that everyone starts developing can easily overcome the virus. And that's what herd immunity is. It is informed that certain type of breathing exercise will boost immunity of lungs and we will be more immune to COVID-19. How far is that relevant? None of these have any scientific evidence. I remember reading an article by Baba Ramdev, who was saying that if you can hold your breath for 1 minute, you cannot get COVID-19. If you can hold your breath for 1 minute, it only means that you have good lung function. That's all it means. It means your lungs can hold breath for 1 minute and retain that level of air. It has nothing to do with COVID-19. The way COVID-19 spreads from the nose into the lungs and it attacks the receptors, it has nothing to do with lung function before the disease that is being spread. I don't see any scientific evidence to prove that. But doing good lung function tests is healthy for other reasons. How far thermal screening is useful? What is trigger for body temperature? Whenever your body tries to fight any organism, it will raise the body temperature. So having fever is a sign that your body is fighting something. It's fighting an infection. So high body temperature means it is active stage of disease, which means your body is creating immunity and trying to fight, and it is under a war zone. And that's why thermal screening helps to identify people in active stages. Thermal screening will definitely miss out asymptomatic people. Thermal screening will definitely miss out carrier stage. But thermal screening is a very good way to screen people for, any active disease, not specific to COVID-19. You could have a bacterial infection also. You could have any other viral infection also. But it just, for a screening purpose, is a very quick non-touch way to see if somebody has an active disease or not. So that is the way. Are we yet to peak since test has not been exhaustive? India has not followed the trajectory with other countries, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. But I am of the opinion, based on the data that I see, that we are testing adequately. We don't have to test exhaustively. We are testing adequately because the numbers are in line with the ability of the virus. Because with the amount of awareness about COVID-19 in the entire population today, all the way from migrant laborers to Ambanis, everybody is aware of COVID-19. And I don't think there is any hospital in the country which is not reporting a lung-related death or which is not testing a person in the ICU with any lung disease. So I don't think we are missing a large number of deaths and severe diseases. And we may not obviously be testing a lot of asymptomatic people or a lot of people in, mild symptoms, but we are not missing out on deaths. And that is and if you look at, we're not even crossed 2,000 deaths after even screening more than 50,000 people. It shows that we are not really having that kind of a severity like other countries are having. Now, for example, if we had 2,000 deaths and 4,000 people screened, then obviously that's a 50% mortality and something is wrong, and that could prove that we are not testing enough. But we are still under the 3.33 mortality rate, which is characteristic of COVID-19. So as long as we are meeting that kind of statistics, that it's probably in line with adequate testing. What type of are we yet to peak? Some people say there will be a peak in June and July, and the trends look like that, because now we are seeing average 3,000 to 3,600 cases per day. But since this has been there with us now since early March, normally the peak is expected at the end of the second month or the third month. So with that logic, either end of May or early June is when we should see a peak. What types of exercises will enhance our immune system? Typically, exercises are not really directly related to immune system, but if you have all the components like I mentioned, ginger, garlic, almonds, dark chocolate, spinach, vitamin C, citrus fruit intake, dals, proteins, green leafy vegetables. In addition to that, yoga is considered as something that helps in better circulation, blood supply to your body, and these nutrients then reach to larger number of cells. So anything which helps you in with things like yoga or cardio exercises, especially running, treadmills, those kind of things are known to improve blood circulation and better dissemination of the immune components that you're taking. So those you can do. Person with good high immunity power, can his or her good humanity power kill COVID-19 without medicine? I don't know what humanity power is. If you are meaning that immunity, yes, if somebody has a good immunity and that immune function is very fast to respond, it does not allow the spread of the virus very quickly, yes, it can obviously cure. And and COVID-19 has to be treated without any medicine. So it will have to be the body's immunity either sooner or later to do it. We are not giving any medicine that kills the virus, by the way. We are just giving supportive treatment. Is there a chance increase in June, July? Yeah, I think May end and June it can be increased. Has vaccination in the childhood helped? BCG vaccination in the childhood seems to have helped people. Otherwise, I don't think any other vaccine does. Why are the number of cases high in Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra? One of the reasons, I think, these two areas, I think there have been a lot of episodic crowding activities that have happened, which have led to a lot of direct spread. Even in Delhi, for that same reason, a lot of migrant labor, accumulation, travel, railway stations being completely packed, shopping complexes being completely packed. A lot of this close proximity and social distancing breach has happened in these particular regions, which can explain why. And especially in Maharashtra and Delhi, there's a lot of people who have traveled and who've also come. So that's why that could be another reason. After a certain time being, when the spreading of corona is at a less and works are back in routine, how could healthy immune person avoid spreading the disease to weaker immune person, especially the elderly in a family who stays at home all the time? See, the social distancing protocols, I think, have to be met if you want to, in future, reduce the spread of any respiratory, virus. And simple social distancing things is that when you are dealing with people with low immunity, especially elders, it's always good to keep either a 6 feet distance, or if you're going close to them, you're taking care of them, then wear a mask when you're around them so that you don't spread your germs to them. When they go out, make sure that they wear a mask even after the COVID-19 situation comes down. It's good practice. Many countries, Japan is a country that follows this even before COVID-19. They follow social distancing protocols just as a normal practice. They wear masks when they go out in public places all the time. And when they sneeze or cough, sneeze it in the elbow. And wear a mask in public areas. Reduce your face touching. We touch our face average 23 times an hour. And COVID-19 does not spread by just touching an infected item. COVID-19 spreads when you touch an infected item and then touch your face and bring it close to your nose and mouth. So even if you touch a lot of COVID positive areas, but you don't touch your face, you are not going to get COVID-19. It does not go through the skin. It goes through the nose and mouth. Like I'm touching my face now, if I do all of these things, if I would have touched anything before, I will definitely get COVID-19. But if I touch something, some surface with COVID-19 and I don't touch my face, there's no way I can get COVID-19. So that is the thing. So that is one of the, the ways that one can get. And the other, thing that one has to do in addition to these things is, cough and sneeze in the elbow. Do not touch the face, 6 feet distance, and wearing a mask. And if you do these things, even otherwise, you will follow the protocols of not having this issue. How can we know the immune level of a person by staying home? You cannot know the immune level of a person. You can just basically see whether a person is not falling ill again and again. If the person is not falling sick again and again, then that's a sign of a good immune system. High fever is a sign of a good immune system. It means your immunity is working and your body is fighting against a particular disease. So, but otherwise, there is no real way. Hot water gargling 3-4 times a day and drinking hot milk with turmeric kills virus. You can gargle 2 to 3 times per day as a healthy practice. It really does not have anything to do specifically to COVID-19. Turmeric is also an immune boosting substance. You can take it for just general immunity, and generally warm items do not have viruses. So these are all good practices for any virus. It has nothing specific for COVID-19, but these are good practices that you can follow. How do we know that we have killed or cleared the virus after 1, 2, 3, 4 months? When you get an RT-PCR test and the test does not show any RNA, does not show the sign of the virus in your secretions, then that means you do not have the virus and that has been cleared out from your system. That is the only way to know it. Or if you do an immunoglobulin rapid test, which may be more accessible, you may be able to order it and do it at home, or some lab may be able to do it at home maybe after 1 or 2 months. If the rapid immunoglobulin test comes, then if you have only the IgG positive and IgM is negative, then that also means you have killed and cleared the virus after a few months. So these are the tests which you can do to make out. Great. I think this has been a very engaging discussion, and there have been a lot of questions asked. If there are any more questions, I can take a couple of more, and if there are no more questions, then we can close the session. Do the cured person need to test repeatedly for COVID-19? There is no need for it, because if the person is not developing new symptoms, then you have to assume that once the test has come negative, then you remain negative. If we were a smaller country and we had enough test kits, and if the test kits were available, like you can get any blood test in a lab nowadays, right? You can go to any lab and get a complete blood count. You can get a malaria test. You can get any test you want. I think if we reach a stage where we can get COVID-19 testing done at that level on our own will, then you can test yourself once after 2-3 months just to know whether you are positive or not. But there's no requirement for it, and even if you are asymptomatic and you are a carrier, see, I think to answer your question, there is no reason to not follow social distancing protocols forever, because once this kind of a pandemic has occurred, it's going to occur, some form or the other. There's going to be some or the other form of viral infection. We don't know. Some other form of viral infection will awaken a dormant COVID-19 inside you also. There's no answer to all of that. It is just a matter of following some simple things. Just like when you go in a two-wheeler, you wear a helmet, or when you sit in a car, you wear a seat belt. Next time you go to a crowded place, wear a mask. Don't touch your face. When you touch things, wash your hands for 20 seconds. Try to keep 6 feet distance wherever possible. That's all. And I'm sure many countries have been able to implement this. It is not a very difficult practice. to implement, then you don't really need to know whether you are positive, whether you're negative, whether you're carrier, whether you're asymptomatic. I mean, even if you know those answers, I don't think the need for the social distancing protocols is going to go. I mean, not following social distancing protocols is going to go away. So just keep following this. That's all. And if you don't touch your face, your chance of getting COVID-19 comes down by 99%. The only chance you can get COVID-19 if someone sneezes or coughs on your face. For that, if you wear a mask and you don't touch your face, that's it. You will never get COVID-19. The problem is we cannot stop touching our face. So that is the thing. Many people suggest so many Ayurvedic Siddha home remedies, which is confusing. Nothing is confusing, sir or madam. I'm not sure who has written, Mr. Venkat Subramaniam Srinivas. Okay. See, any modality of treatment, whether it is yoga, whether it is Ayurveda, whether it is Siddha, whether it is homeopathy, please see the basis of the claim. If the particular drug is scientifically tested, Ayurvedic drugs now undergo clinical trials. Homeopathy treatments are undergoing clinical trials. Siddha medications are undergoing clinical trials. Clinical trial is not an allopathic activity. A clinical trial is testing anything that sees an outcome. It could be yoga, it could be swimming, it could be meditation, it could be breathing, it could be Ayurveda, it could be anything. A clinical any of these things are based off. I treated 4 patients. They all became. Do not follow such instructions because they're not studied well, right? If somebody says, okay, I took this Ayurvedic drug and it has scientifically, we did a study, and in the study it showed 90% of the patients recovered and 10% did not because of it, then the science and the analytics and the study is not allopathic. Okay, that is just a scientific approach you use for anything. We use science, data, analytics for even non-medical things. So make sure that whatever you follow has some strong basis. Not my uncle told that you use a combination of this and that and it works. Then that's a single anecdote. There is no scientific data. You take it, you're taking the risk that, okay, it worked in one group of people, it may not work in you, right? And that has been proven time and again. Hydroxychloroquine, which initially people were so sure that the Indian government released a protocol saying take for prophylaxis. When the clinical testing results came, it showed it does not work, it even worsens, right? So you have to wait and see whether this kind of data. Do not try anything which does not have, decent data. Amruta, barley, ginger, pepper, clove, boiled in water, and lemon added can build immune power. Is it effective? All of these things, see, ginger is known to be an immune, booster. So obviously these things boost immunity, and the components, the vegetables and the items that I have listed all have clinically studied proven that they build immunity. So you can do this. Will virus survive in swimming pool or any other? Will the virus survive in swimming pool or any water body and spread consuming them? Yes, that is why swimming pools will probably be one of the last things to open, because there is a lot of body secretion transfer that happens, because multiple people are swimming. Lot of nose secretions and mouth secretions come out. So anywhere where your nose and mouth secretions interlink, whether you are sharing food, eating from the same spoon, drinking from the same bottle, is almost the same thing as getting into a swimming pool with a lot of people's body secretions, and it can definitely spread. Is virus can get transferred when you touch your eyes? Look, COVID-19 is a lung disease. It's a lung disease virus. From the eye to enter the airway, there is a very thin tube called the nasolacrimal duct. Very, very, very small amount can go from the nasolacrimal duct into the nose. There has not been any study that has shown that from the eye, it goes into the nose with such high volumes. So there is no science behind it, but anything close to your nose and anything close to your mouth, both open into the lungs, into the windpipe. That's why the amount of viral load that goes there is very high. And that's why touching around the nose and face is considered to be very, very dangerous, and is one of the biggest reason for spread. Because the chances of that you are going to be there when somebody sneezes on your face is very, very low, right? You will most likely wear a mask, and you won't be facing face to face with somebody like that. Most of the times it's going to be you touch the doorknob somewhere and then you scratch your face, or you're thinking like this, or you're doing this, or you got some nose itchy, or you're going on adjusting the mask. Biggest reason for spread is not wearing the mask properly. You know, people are reusing the mask. They're a disposable mask they're reusing for months. They're going on touching, removing, touching, removing. Once you wear a mask, you never touch the mask from the front. The only time you touch the mask from the front is the first time you wear it, when you pinch the top part of the mask. After that, you never touch the mask. I've seen so many people outside, they're removing the mask by touching it from the front and then putting it back. The whole purpose of the mask is gone. You've touched some other surface and you've touched the front of the mask, and you're going on removing the mask like this. That is a very incorrect way. You'll get the virus because of the mask usage, because your hand is touching it again and again. You have to only remove the mask like this and put it back like this. And after 4 to 6 hours of usage, you have to throw the disposable mask. If you're reusing a mask, it has to be a cloth mask, which after every 4 to 6 hours, you have to wash, wear a new one, wash that, and just like how you do for clothes and undergarments. You have to keep changing the mask like that. Okay, so that is the reason why it spreads so much. Should we use mask when we are inside house? Not at all. Mask usage is indicated only in 2 situations. If you are taking care of a sick person, or if you're taking care of a person who's suspected to have COVID-19, you're going in close contact to them, you're taking care of them, they're your elderly parents, or there's somebody in your house, you're giving them food, you're getting them up from the bed, taking them to toilet, you have to wear a mask. Otherwise, you don't have to wear a mask. The other reason when you wear a mask is when you go to a public place where 6 feet social distancing is not possible. You're in a bus, you're in a metro, you're in a shopping complex, you're going to pharmacy, you're going to buy groceries. You cannot maintain the 6 feet distancing. Then you are going to have to wear a mask. If you are running in a park where there is nobody in the next 6 feet and nobody there anyway, you don't have to wear a mask even in a park, or when you are jogging outside your house. The mask has to be worn only when you are in close proximity to people. Prolonged usage of mask produces hypoxia. Can you explain what does it mean to? Prolonged usage of mask does not lead to hypoxia. I have not seen any data. The masks are usually breathable. That's the whole idea of the mask, that it is a filter. It is not metal. It is not completely stopping your breathing. But mask usage is never required for more than half an hour to an hour. See, when you're going out into a public place, how long are you going to be in a shopping market, or how long are you going to be in a chemist shop? You're not going to be there more than a couple of hours. That's all the time you need to wear the mask. Once you're back inside the house, you don't need to wear a mask. If you're sitting in your office and each office cabin chair is 6 feet away, you don't need to wear a mask for the whole day, right? At all times. So obviously, if you wear the mask for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, then you are going to feel a little bit suffocated, because this area is supposed to be normally left open and you're wearing something. But for 1 to 2 hour mask usage, it does not cause any hypoxia. Okay, if there are, I think we've covered all topics, and I think this has been a very engaging conversation. Please leave your feedback, and we look forward to staying in touch. And if you have any other questions or doubts, you can please reach out to me. I have a helpline number that we run where you have any questions. I'm just putting this number here, 974-007-6668. If you have any COVID-19 related questions that you want me and my team to answer, we'll get back to you. But otherwise, please stay healthy, and going forward, please maintain the basic social distancing protocols, which I can repeat. 6 feet distance whenever you go outside. Whenever you're in a public place where a lot of people are there, wear a mask. Do not touch your face. Do not touch the front of the mask. wash your hands for 20 seconds whenever you feel you've touched anything or contaminated anything, and cough and sneeze on your elbow. I think with those things, thank you very much once again, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much for your valuable time.
Thank
It's an
you.
excellent, simple and practical inputs. I hope all of you will practice that and ensure that you are well protected from COVID. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.